History was not kind to animals, and sometimes it was downright unhinged. In this video, you'll see chickens in sunglasses, bears in the army, pigeons guiding missiles, and aristocrats turning live creatures into party props. These are 33 real moments when humans looked at animals and thought, yes, let's make this even weirder. 1. In the 1950s, some American chicken farmers looked at a pecking problem and somehow arrived at the sentence, what if the hens needed eyewear? So they bought millions of tiny plastic rose-colored glasses for chickens. This was not fashion. It was farm psychology with a side of pure nonsense. Chickens are attracted to red, especially blood, which can trigger aggressive pecking. So the glasses filtered that color and made the birds less likely to turn the coop into a feathery fight club. Some versions even clipped onto the beak without screws, which means somebody had a full-time job designing chicken sunglasses. Imagine walking into a barn and seeing row after row of hens looking like they were heading to a very low-budget beach party. Ridiculous? Completely. Effective enough that farmers kept buying them? Also yes. Humanity really saw poultry violence and answered with optical accessories. 2. In ancient Rome, rich women had a solution for brutal summer heat that sounds like satire written by a lizard. Some elite Roman ladies reportedly wore live snakes around their necks as cooling accessories. Not venomous ones, thankfully, but large enough to function as a very committed piece of jewelry. The logic was simple. Snakes are cold-blooded, so their bodies stayed cool, which made them the ancient equivalent of portable air conditioning. Today, people buy silk scarves or tiny battery fans. Roman high society apparently said, no, hand me a living reptile. And because this was Rome, a civilization that already normalized public baths, lead pipes, and dinner parties that never ended, the idea did not even seem wildly out of place. It is one of those details that makes the ancient world feel less like marble statues and more like a fever dream funded by inherited wealth. 3. In 19th century South Africa, a railway signalman named James Wide lost both legs in an accident and later hired a baboon named Jack to help him work the signals. That already sounds like the setup to a joke, except it was real enough to make officials nervous. Jack learned how to operate the railway switches and even helped push his owner to work in a trolley. When railway authorities discovered that an actual baboon was handling signal duties, they tested him expecting disaster. Instead, Jack performed perfectly. He was then officially employed, which means a baboon somehow became a legitimate railway worker, before a lot of humans got decent labor protections. He was paid in food, and yes, a ration of beer was part of the arrangement, because apparently Victorian management was built on vibes. Most absurd of all, Jack reportedly worked for 9 years without a single signaling mistake. A baboon. Flawless. Humans, take notes. 4. In 17th century parts of Europe, aristocrats invented a party game called fox tossing, and it was exactly as bad as it sounds. Pairs of noblemen and noblewomen stood opposite each other holding the ends of a sling, then used it to launch live foxes high into the air. Sometimes other animals were used too, because apparently one layer of madness was not enough for the upper classes. The goal was height, spectacle, and entertainment, which tells you a lot about what happened when people had too much money, too much leisure, and absolutely no normal hobbies. This was not some rough village custom either. It became a fashionable court amusement in places like Saxony and Prussia. Imagine dressing in silk, powdering your wig, and then spending the afternoon catapulting terrified animals for applause. Historians can debate many things, but on this one point, the verdict feels simple. Aristocratic boredom was a public health crisis. 5. During World War II, the United States seriously funded a plan to turn bats into living incendiary delivery systems. The idea came from a dentist who thought Japanese cities, with many wooden buildings, could be set on fire by attaching tiny timed firebombs to hibernating bats and releasing them at dawn. The bats would naturally roost in attics and eaves, then the devices would ignite and start fires all over the target area. Insane? Absolutely. Official? Also yes. The military called it Project X-Ray, and and spent millions developing containers, mini explosives, and methods for handling thousands of very confused bats. In one test, some escaped early and accidentally burned part of an American airfield, which is the most predictable thing about this whole story. The project was eventually dropped when the atomic bomb program moved faster, but for a while, weaponized bats were genuinely on the table. History is not subtle. 6. Medieval and early modern Europe did something so bizarre it feels invented by a drunk playwright. People put animals on trial in actual courts. Pigs were the most famous defendants because they lived close to humans and sometimes injured children, but rats, cows, horses, and even insects could also find themselves in legal trouble. These cases were handled with astonishing seriousness. Animals could be dressed, brought before judges, assigned lawyers, and formally accused of crimes like murder or crop destruction. Yes, a pig might receive more legal ceremony than many peasants ever saw in their lives. The logic came from a world where religion, law, and symbolism were tightly tangled together, so punishing the animal was treated as restoring moral order. Which means somewhere in European history, adults in robes spent real time debating the criminal intent of livestock. Medieval justice was many things, but relaxed was not one of them. 7. In the 19th century, smugglers moving valuable Belgian lace into France came up with a method so absurdly elaborate it deserves criminal awards. They used dogs. The animals were shaved, then wrapped tightly in expensive lace. After that, smugglers covered the bundles with a false outer layer, basically disguising the dog as just another dog, only now secretly made of contraband. Then they sent the animal running across the border toward an accomplice waiting on the other side. It was low-tech, weirdly ingenious, and completely dependent on border guards not suspecting that the fluffy creature trotting past them was carrying a small luxury textile economy under its fake coat. Lace was highly taxed and very profitable, which explains why people turned household pets into moving smuggling compartments. The whole scheme sounds less like organized crime and more like a feverish dare. But when tariffs get high enough, apparently everyone becomes a terrible inventor. 8. Before refrigerators became common, people in parts of Russia and Finland sometimes used live frogs to keep milk fresh, which is one of those facts that makes modern kitchen hygiene feel like a miracle. A brown frog could be dropped straight into a bucket of milk, where it basically functioned as a slimy little preservation system. The reason was not pure superstition. Certain frogs produce antimicrobial substances on their skin, and those compounds could slow the growth of bacteria that turned milk sour. So yes, there was actual chemistry hiding inside the madness. Still, imagine being offered a glass of fresh milk and noticing there had recently been a frog involved. Not flavored by frog, hopefully, just protected by frog. It is practical in a brutal pre-refrigeration way, but also deeply unsettling. Humanity really spent centuries solving food storage by looking around the swamp and thinking, that one might help. 9. Wojtek was a Syrian brown bear who went from orphaned cub to officially enlisted soldier in the Polish forces during World War II, because history occasionally decides realism is overrated. Polish troops in the Middle East bought him from a boy, raised him, and eventually gave him army status so he could travel with the unit more easily. He learned to imitate the men around him, drinking from bottles, wrestling for fun, and developing a taste for beer. During the Italian campaign, especially around Monte Cassino, he became famous for helping carry heavy artillery shells, which inspired the unit's emblem of a bear holding a shell. Let that sink in. An actual bear became military branding because he genuinely did the work. After the war, Wojtek retired to a zoo in Scotland, where former soldiers visited him like an old comrade. Out of all the strange wartime mascots, Wojtek may be the only one who could also outlift the entire squad. 10. 19th century flea circuses were what happened when skilled showmen looked at a parasite and saw performance art. Using techniques borrowed from watchmaking and fine metalwork, entertainers harnessed live fleas with tiny wires or threads and attached them to miniature carts, cannon props, or little stage sets. Because fleas are unbelievably strong for their size, they could pull these objects around, creating the illusion of microscopic circus acts. Some displays made it seem like the fleas were dueling, driving carriages, or playing instruments, which was less a circus and more a masterclass in manipulating the audience's eyesight. The whole thing thrived in an era obsessed with miniatures, mechanical marvels, and public curiosities. And honestly, if you paid to see this, who could blame you? It is grotesque, ingenious, and deeply on brand for the 19th century, a time when people apparently thought, you know what entertainment lacks? Tiny overworked bloodsuckers in harness. 11. Ancient Roman commanders sometimes carried sacred chickens onto warships and treated them like divine consultants, because nothing says military professionalism quite like waiting for poultry to confirm your battle plan. These birds were used in a form of augury. Before combat, grain would be thrown down, and if the chickens ate eagerly, especially if kernels dropped from their beaks, that was taken as a favorable sign from the gods. If they refused to eat, the omen was bad, and an attack might be delayed. So yes, the fate of fleets could hang on whether some stressed birds felt snackish. One Roman commander, Publius Claudius Pulcher, was so annoyed by uncooperative sacred chickens that he reportedly ordered them thrown into the sea, saying if they would not eat, they could drink. He then lost the battle, which did not exactly help the anti-chicken faction. Rome conquered half the known world, but it still outsourced strategy to birds. 12. Ferrets have been used as living cable pullers because humans eventually realized that a long, flexible animal with zero respect for personal space is perfect for narrow pipes. In Britain and the United States, engineers trained ferrets to run through tight conduits carrying strings or lightweight lines, which could then be used to pull heavier cable behind them. It was practical, cheap, and a lot less complicated than dismantling half a building. One of the best-known examples came much later, when ferrets helped pull cable from major broadcast events, including coverage linked to the wedding of Princess Diana and big Millennium productions in Greenwich. So while TV audiences were watching polished royal pageantry, somewhere behind the scenes a ferret had probably done crucial infrastructure work like a tiny furry subcontractor. It is one of those jobs animals were weirdly good at, because evolution made them excellent at invading holes. Civilization owes more to small chaos noodles than it likes to admit. 13. In 19th century New York, especially before modern sanitation systems took hold, pigs wandered the streets of Manhattan eating garbage as unofficial municipal cleanup crews. This was not just tolerated by accident. For a time, it was part of how the city functioned. Rubbish, food scraps, and general urban filth piled up fast, and free-roaming pigs converted some of that waste into pork while terrifying pedestrians and turning narrow streets into a muddy public experiment. Imagine trying to present yourself as a rising world city while livestock are rummaging through refuse outside your door like they own the tax base. Reformers hated it, poorer residents depended on it, and everyone had to navigate the smell. The pigs did solve part of the trash problem, just in the most chaotic way possible. It was recycling 19th century style, inefficient, unsanitary, and powered by animals that looked like they were seconds away from filing a union complaint. 14. In parts of Mexico, there is a long tradition of using living beetles called maquech as jewelry. And yes, that means exactly what it sounds like. A decorated live beetle, often adorned with stones or beads, and attached with a small chain, could be pinned onto clothing and worn like a brooch while it moved around. The practice has roots in regional custom and folklore, particularly in Yucatan, where the insect became both ornament and conversation starter. And what a conversation starter it was, because ordinary jewelry does not suddenly decide to crawl toward your shoulder during a party. Supporters viewed it as beautiful, exotic, and culturally meaningful. Everyone else probably had questions. It is a perfect example of the strange line humans love to cross where fashion stops being an accessory and starts being a mildly controlled life form. Somewhere between elegance and chaos, a jeweled beetle is just strolling across your chest like it pays rent. 15. Early 20th century Florida had an entertainment industry so desperate for novelty that it looked at the largest bird on Earth and thought, "Can we race that?" The answer, incredibly, was yes. Ostrich farms became tourist attractions, and promoters staged races where people rode ostriches or hitched them to lightweight chariots for derby-style events. The result was exactly as dignified as you are imagining, which is to say, not at all. Ostriches are fast, powerful, and not remotely designed for human nonsense, so the races were chaotic spectacles built to sell tickets and postcards. Visitors loved them because the whole thing looked impossible, like a prank that somehow acquired a grandstand. Florida, naturally, embraced it. This was the golden age of roadside attractions and sensational entertainment, so strapping a person to an outraged giant bird apparently seemed like a solid business model. Tourism has produced many questionable decisions, and this was absolutely one of them. 16. Victorian inventor George Merriweather built a weather-predicting machine powered by leeches, because the 19th century never met a bad idea it could not improve with glass and brass. His invention, called the Tempest Prognosticator, placed leeches in a circle of small glass bottles around a central mechanism. According to Merriweather, when a storm was approaching, the leeches became agitated, climbed upward, and triggered little whalebone hammers that rang bells. So a room full of disturbed leeches basically formed an organic alarm system for bad weather. Even by Victorian standards, a period already drowning in gadgets, this was spectacularly eccentric. Yet it came from a serious attempt to predict storms more accurately, especially for maritime safety. That is what makes it so wonderful. Beneath the absurdity was real scientific curiosity. Still, imagine inviting guests over and proudly saying, "Listen carefully. If my leeches start ringing bells, cancel your picnic." 17. Before modern kitchen technology, Britain bred a type of dog for one astonishingly bleak purpose: running inside a wheel to turn roasting spits. These turnspit dogs were small, sturdy, and selected for endurance because their entire professional identity was being canine rotisserie engines. In large kitchens, especially inns and wealthy households, they ran in wooden wheels mounted high near the fire, and that motion turned the meat for even roasting. If one dog got tired, another could take over, because apparently the staffing plan for dinner involved tag-team dog labor. The breed eventually disappeared once mechanical spit turners became common, which is probably the least shocking part of its history. It is hard to imagine a more specific and thankless job. No herding, no hunting, no companionship, just endless treadmill duty while someone bastes a goose nearby. Humans really looked at a dog and said, "Excellent. Now please become a kitchen appliance." 18. During World War II, behaviorist B.F. Skinner worked on a U.S. project that trained pigeons to guide missiles, because when engineers hit a wall, apparently the next step was consulting birds. The plan was clever in a terrifyingly strange way. A pigeon sat inside the nose cone facing a screen that displayed the target. It had been trained to peck the image whenever it drifted off center. Those pecks activated controls that corrected the missile's course. Skinner proved the birds could do it with surprising accuracy, which means there was a moment in military research when pigeon concentration outperformed expensive hardware. The program, often called Project Pigeon, and later revived under another name, was eventually abandoned as electronic guidance improved. Probably for the best. Still, it remains one of history's greatest examples of weaponized ingenuity meeting absolute lunacy. Somewhere in an alternate timeline, military veterans are explaining that a very focused bird once handled precision targeting. 19. In 19th century fairs and gambling dens, people played a game called mouse roulette, which took the basic idea of chance and added a terrified rodent for extra drama. The setup was simple and awful. A live mouse was placed in the center of a circular board surrounded by numbered holes. When the game started, the frightened animal would dart into one of the openings, and the chosen hole determined the winner. So instead of a bouncing ball or spinning wheel doing the work, the house relied on panic with whiskers. It was cheap, lively, and exactly the sort of attraction that flourished in noisy popular entertainments, where moral standards were more of a decorative suggestion. The mouse, of course, had not applied for this role. What makes the whole thing so weird is how familiar it feels. Humans have always loved turning randomness into spectacle. We just do it now with less squeaking and better furniture. 20. By the late 19th century, certain French aesthetes and decadent elites had become so committed to luxury that ordinary decoration no longer satisfied them. Enter the jeweled living tortoise. Inspired in part by the feverish world of decadent literature and high society excess, some fashionable circles reportedly adorned live tortoise shells with gold, gems, and other precious ornament. Then the animal simply wandered across carpets like an expensive moving centerpiece, which is both extravagant and deeply absurd. A vase can sit still and look elegant. A tortoise, however, introduces uncertainty. It might pause under a chair, scrape across the floor, or wander off with the room's entire artistic concept on its back. That was part of the appeal. It turned wealth into performance, a way of showing that even living creatures could be transformed into decorative statements. When your lifestyle reaches diamond turtle on the rug, normal rich people behavior is already several exits behind you. 21. In the 1960s, parts of the Pacific Northwest, especially around Washington state, turned octopus wrestling into a real underwater sport because apparently scuba diving alone was not dramatic enough. Divers would descend, find giant Pacific octopuses, and attempt to wrestle them to the surface in front of cheering spectators. The bigger the octopus, the better the bragging rights. It was marketed as rugged, adventurous fun, the kind of thing that made a person look like they personally challenged the ocean to a duel. Looking back, it feels less heroic and more like a very strange misunderstanding of what recreation should be. Giant octopuses are intelligent, powerful animals, not aquatic trophies for bored thrill seekers. Still, for a while this was treated as a legitimate competitive event, complete with publicity and local pride. History keeps proving that if humans discover something remarkable in nature, one of our first instincts is to organize a contest around harassing it. 22. The ancient Romans credited sacred geese with helping save the capital during a Gallic attack, and from then on, geese earned a reputation as elite security staff with feathers. Unlike dogs, which reportedly failed to raise the alarm in that famous story, the geese made a racket loud enough to alert defenders when enemies approached at night. That talent made them valuable as living alarm systems in temples and important compounds. It sounds silly until you remember that geese are aggressive, territorial, and fully committed to screaming about absolutely everything. In other words, they were perfect. No batteries, no metal parts, just a biological siren with wings and a terrible attitude. Rome built roads, aqueducts, and legal systems, but it also understood one timeless truth. If you need early warning, hire the angriest bird available. Modern security firms may have cameras and sensors, but none of them can match the raw conviction of a goose convinced you do not belong here. 23. In 19th century America, some farms and households used sheep and goats as walking power sources by putting them on treadmills connected to machinery. Butter churns, washing devices, and other labor-saving equipment could be driven by the steady motion of an animal pacing in place. It was simple engineering. Turn animal boredom into useful rotation. Horses had long powered larger machines, but smaller livestock were cheaper for people who needed something modest and practical. So somewhere in rural America, a goat was basically functioning as a compact home appliance while pretending this was normal. The image is ridiculous, but the logic made sense in a world before cheap electric motors. People used whatever power they had, whether that meant wind, water, muscle, or one unimpressed sheep walking in circles because breakfast depended on it. It is one of those forgotten technologies that reminds you how inventive pre-electric life could be, and how often that ingenuity rested on an animal doing a very repetitive job. 24. In the late 19th century, some American women wore live chameleons attached to their clothing as fashion accessories, because apparently static brooches had become too predictable. The reptiles were fastened with delicate chains or small fixtures so they could cling to a dress, shoulder, or bodice while serving as exotic living ornament. This fit neatly into an era obsessed with novelty, imported curiosities, and turning the natural world into personal display. Birds, feathers, insects, even whole taxidermy pieces all found their way into fashion, so a live chameleon somehow became part of the same stylish madness. The effect must have been unforgettable. One moment you are making polite conversation, the next, your jewelry blinks. Supporters probably called it elegant and daring. Everyone else likely wondered why a lizard was staring at them from across the room. Fashion history is full of questionable choices, but wearable reptiles deserve their own special shelf of bad decisions. 25. In modern Africa, giant pouched rats have been trained to detect landmines, and unlike many historical examples of animal exploitation, this one is weird, brilliant, and genuinely life-saving. These rats are light enough that they do not trigger the mines, which means they can scamper across dangerous ground more safely than humans or machines. Trainers teach them to identify explosive chemicals, and when they find a target, they signal for a reward, usually bits of banana or peanuts. They also work quickly, covering areas much faster than manual deminers with metal detectors. The image is almost comical at first, a giant rat in a little harness saving lives like an underpaid action hero. But the results are serious. These animals have helped clear deadly fields and even detect tuberculosis in lab settings. It is one of the few times history's answer to "what are humans doing with this animal?" is not horrifying, but surprisingly admirable and wildly effective. 26. In ancient China, especially in traditions associated with the Tang period and later echoes of that culture, people sometimes attached tiny bamboo whistles to pigeons so that flocks produced eerie music while flying overhead. As the birds moved through the air, wind rushed through the little devices and created humming, whistling, almost orchestral sounds in the sky. Imagine looking up and hearing the clouds start singing because somebody had engineered a flock into a musical instrument. The effect could be beautiful, haunting, or slightly unsettling depending on your mood and how many birds were involved. It was part entertainment, part spectacle, and part demonstration of refined urban culture where even everyday animals could be turned into art. This was not practical labor or military use. It was atmospheric design using feathers and airflow. Humans have always had a talent for taking something already amazing, like flight, and making it just a little stranger by adding sound effects. 27. In medieval and early modern Europe, small lapdogs often served a job that was less glamorous than portraits suggest. They were used as living bed warmers, tucked beneath blankets or kept close against the body to provide heat during cold nights in drafty houses and castles. Before central heating, winter indoors could be miserable, especially in large stone buildings that looked impressive and felt like refrigerated tombs. So wealthy households kept little dogs not only for companionship but for warmth, especially around the feet. Some were even called chamber dogs because they spent so much time indoors doing exactly this kind of work. It sounds cute until you realize the animal's official role was basically luxury hot water bottle with a heartbeat. Still, in a freezing room lit by candles, having a warm dog under the covers probably felt less ridiculous and more like survival with tail wagging. History gets much softer when viewed from the foot of the bed. 28. In early 20th century America, horse diving became a wildly popular attraction in which horses ran up a platform and leaped from heights that could reach around 40 feet into a tank of water below. Yes, people built towers specifically to convince horses to become involuntary stunt performers. The act was made famous at places like Atlantic City and later spread through traveling shows, where crowds came to watch the spectacle of a massive animal launching into a pool with a rider on its back. It was advertised as thrilling and glamorous because entertainment has always had a dangerous talent for dressing up bad ideas in bright lights. Supporters claimed the horses were trained and unharmed, critics were horrified, and modern audiences tend to stare at the whole concept in disbelief. Of all the ways humans have monetized animals, this one feels especially surreal. Someone saw a horse and thought, "Great animal, needs more diving?" 29. In ancient China, poor students are said to have caught fireflies and kept them in thin cloth bags or small containers to use as nighttime light for studying. Whether every tale is literal or partly moralized, the image became a powerful symbol of dedication to learning. A student too poor for oil lamps reading by the glow of insects. It is beautiful, resourceful, and just a little heartbreaking. Fireflies are not exactly industrial-grade lighting, so this was never going to illuminate a whole room like a proper lantern. But in a world where access to education often depended on relentless effort, even a weak natural glow could matter. The story survived because it captured something people admired: persistence in the face of scarcity. Still, there is also something wonderfully weird about building a study lamp out of captured beetles. Human ambition has always been stubborn enough to turn even summer bugs into academic equipment. 30. Cormorant fishing in Asia is one of those traditions that looks impossible until you see the logic. Fishermen trained cormorants, expert diving birds, to catch fish in rivers and lakes. A ring or snare was placed around the bird's neck, tight enough to stop larger fish from being swallowed, though smaller ones could still pass through, so the bird got some reward for its work. When the cormorant surfaced with a big catch, the fishermen simply retrieved the fish from its throat and sent the bird back out again. Efficient? Very. Slightly medieval in spirit? Absolutely. The practice has a long history in places like China and Japan, where it became both livelihood and cultural performance. Watching it today can seem almost theatrical. Lanterns on the water, boats drifting quietly, birds diving like hired specialists. It is cooperative hunting, but with a level of control that makes the whole arrangement feel uncomfortably close to outsourced fish theft. 31. In Victorian England, some dogs became roaming charity collectors on railway platforms, carrying small money boxes or collection tins attached to their bodies while they wandered among passengers soliciting donations. These were not random strays improvising a side hustle. They were trained, known figures, and in some cases locally famous. One dog named Tim became especially celebrated for raising substantial sums for charitable causes, proving that a well-mannered dog with soulful eyes could outperform plenty of human fundraising campaigns. Travelers dropped coins into the containers, partly out of generosity and partly because saying no to a charitable dog feels like the kind of moral failure that follows you home. The whole setup was brilliantly Victorian: earnest philanthropy, public display, and an animal turned into a walking emotional pressure device. It was much harder to ignore need when it arrived with fur, discipline, and a collection box on its back like the most effective volunteer in the station. 32. For generations, coal miners carried canaries underground because these tiny birds were tragically excellent at detecting danger before humans could. In mines, invisible gases like carbon monoxide could build up without warning. The canary, being far more sensitive, would weaken, collapse, or die first, giving miners a precious signal to escape before they were overcome. It was simple, grim, and brutally effective. The bird was not there for comfort or decoration. It was an early warning system with feathers and a terrible survival rate. That is why the phrase "canary in the coal mine" still survives as shorthand for the first sign of a larger threat. There is something haunting about it. Deep underground, surrounded by dust and darkness, workers trusted their lives to the reaction of a fragile little animal in a cage. Industrial progress has many heroic stories, but it also has this one, where survival depended on noticing when the singing stopped. 33. During the First and Second World Wars, ships operating in southern waters sometimes acquired penguins as mascots, because apparently even naval discipline has limits once a waddling bird shows up. Sailors near Antarctic regions occasionally captured or adopted penguins and treated them as part of the crew, naming them, feeding them, and in some cases even making tiny outfits or mock uniforms for them. Was this official military necessity? Not even slightly. Was it exactly the kind of morale-boosting nonsense exhausted crews would embrace after long voyages? Completely. Naval life could be monotonous, filthy, and psychologically grinding, so mascots became a way to inject humor and companionship into the floating machinery of war. Still, the image is extraordinary. Somewhere on a warship, surrounded by steel, oil, and command structures, a penguin is waddling past sailors like it has rank. History keeps insisting that humans will try to recruit absolutely anything if it improves morale by even 2%. So now I want the comment section to turn into a courtroom. Which item on this list was the most insane thing humans ever normalized, and what animal story did we leave out that absolutely deserved a spot here? Drop the weirdest one you know. And if this video earned your disbelief, Hit like, subscribe, and let's keep exposing history's dumbest ideas.